Welcome to Radiance of Knowledge. My name is Richard Thompson, and today I want to share a true story about myself, an experience that made me reflect on love and self-worth. After retiring, I lived alone and gradually felt the weight of solitude. One day, I was introduced to Christine, a woman also looking for companionship. Our meeting went smoothly until she presented 4 conditions for us to move forward. Her demands made me question, is this really what I want? Join me as I take you through this story. My name is Richard Thompson, and I am 67 years old. I was a high school math teacher, but I have been retired for 5 years now. I live alone in a small apartment in Florida, where I have spent more than 20 years of my life. My wife passed away 3 years ago due to cancer, and my only daughter has built her career in New York, so I hardly have anyone by my side. At first, retirement felt pleasant. I was no longer caught up in work, and I had time to enjoy the simple things in life. However, as time went on, I began to realize the emptiness in my life. Dinner for one, long afternoons sitting on the porch looking out at the sea. I gradually understood that growing old alone was not as easy as I had thought. One day, while chatting with my neighbor Linda, a lively woman in her 60s, she asked me, "Richard, have you ever thought about finding a companion?" I laughed and shook my head. At my age, who would still want to date? Linda smiled knowingly and told me about a woman named Christine, a retired nurse who lived in the next town. She was enjoying her life but, like me, also felt lonely. I thought about it for a moment. Maybe meeting someone new wouldn't be such a bad idea. I nodded in agreement, and so, my date with Christine began. I arrived at the cafe 15 minutes early, choosing a table near the window. I ordered a cappuccino and sat there, sipping it slowly while contemplating this meeting. How long had it been since I last went on a date? Probably more than 30 years. The thought made me chuckle quietly. I was both excited and a little nervous. Right on time, Christine walked into the cafe. She was wearing a light blue blouse, her hair neatly styled, and a warm smile appeared on her face. I stood up to greet her, and from the very first handshake, I could sense the confidence she exuded. We quickly struck up a conversation, and I had to admit, our initial exchange went quite smoothly. Christine talked about her years as a nurse, her son who lived in Chicago, and her passion for cooking. I shared stories about my teaching career, my daughter in New York, and my love for gardening in retirement. It seemed we had quite a few things in common, especially the feeling of emptiness that came with living alone. Everything was going well until Christine suddenly became more serious. She told me that there were a few conditions that needed to be made clear if we were to move forward. I was slightly taken aback but listened attentively. At that moment, I had no idea that her upcoming requests would make me reconsider everything. Christine leaned forward, her eyes turning more serious. "I truly appreciate your sincerity," she began. "I also don't want to waste either of our time, so I think it's best if we're upfront right from the start." I nodded, signaling that I was ready to listen. Her first condition was a 6-month trial period of living together. At first, this didn't seem entirely unreasonable. Getting to know each other before making a long-term commitment made sense. But then Christine continued, "In order to proceed with this trial period, I needed to transfer $20 into a joint account as a form of financial commitment. If things didn't work out, she would return the money proportionally based on the time we had lived together." I could hardly believe my ears. $20 just to prove I was serious? Wasn't a relationship supposed to be built on understanding and trust? Before I could react, she moved on to her second condition. Christine had always dreamed of taking a month-long trip to Hawaii. That sounded nice, but the issue was that she expected me to cover all the expenses, flights, hotels, meals, and even a professional photo shoot to capture our memories. I swallowed hard. We had only met less than an hour ago, and she was already envisioning a lavish vacation and couples photos as if we had been together for years. But that wasn't all. Her third condition left me utterly stunned. If things progressed well and we decided to marry, I would have to give her full control over my finances. She believed that, with her years of experience managing expenses as a nurse, she could handle money more efficiently. I would only receive a monthly, personal allowance, and if I exceeded my limit, I would have to compensate by doing household chores. The idea made me feel less like an independent adult and more like a child under strict supervision. Finally, her fourth condition wasn't about money, but it carried a different weight. Regardless of whether we lived together or got married, Christine would not share a bedroom with me. She had been used to having her own space for over a decade and didn't want to change that habit. I understood the need for personal space, but setting this as a non-negotiable rule made me question, what kind of connection would we actually have as a couple? As she finished listing her conditions, I sat there in silence for a long moment. I realized that I wasn't just hearing a set of demands, I was getting a crystal clear picture of a future I had no desire to step into. After Christine finished presenting her 4 conditions, I sat in silence for a moment, trying to process everything I had just heard. I had come here hoping to find a companion to share joy and companionship in the years ahead. But what I received instead was a list of demands that felt more like a contract than a genuine relationship. I took a deep breath, keeping my voice steady. "Thank you for your honesty," I said, "but I think we have different perspectives on what a relationship should be. I can't agree to these conditions." Christine hesitated for a brief moment but quickly regained her polite smile. She nodded slightly, as if she had already anticipated my response. I stood up, paid for my coffee, and walked out of the cafe with a sense of relief. I had made the right choice, staying true to my values rather than trying to force myself into a relationship that wasn't meant for me. Returning home, I sat on my porch with a cup of hot tea, reflecting on the meeting I had just experienced, though there was a slight sense of regret for not finding a companion. I felt relieved for having listened to myself and staying true to the values I hold dear. I realized that at this stage in life, I was no longer searching for a relationship built on transactions or conditions. What I truly longed for was a sincere companionship, one where 2 people could share their joys and sorrows without material constraints or the need for control. Christine might have had her own reasons for her conditions, but I knew exactly what I needed, and if I couldn't find someone who aligned with that, I was at peace with living my life on my own terms, finding contentment in tending to my small garden, reading books, and occasionally calling my daughter. Love and companionship are precious, but the peace of one's own heart is just as worthy of being cherished.